Hi, everybody, and welcome to our webinar today, where we will discuss the 2023 Australian Contact Centre Salary and Workplace Insights Benchmarking Report. Quite a mouthful, but actually reflects a whole lot of information, so quite relevant, really. Auscontact is proud to have again partnered with Citrus Group and COPC to see this report prepared. In the spirit of reconciliation, Auscontact acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. Today's webinar itself will run for approximately 60 minutes, and during that time, with the help of today's guests, Alex, Donna and Julie, we hope this session provides some interesting insights into what is happening in the environment. To round off the session, we'll have a Q&A at the end of the webinar, but equally we're hoping for a interactive session and we'll tell you how to participate soon. This is the third year we've commissioned this research and we're excited to talk through some incredibly interesting findings. We want to thank the broader contact centre community for supporting this research and our members for participating in the surveys that really help us understand the environment and provide us with the opportunity for insights, not just to help us better understand the environment, but to actually guide and steer decision-making and investment decisions across the industry. So I'm Fran Southwood. I'm the CEO of Auscontact and I will be your moderator for today. And while I said earlier, we would love to see some interactions so that we maximise the benefits to you. There's no need to take too many notes. We will send out information afterwards, providing you with a recording of the webinar. So we do hope you can take advantage of the ability to interact. There's a couple of ways you can do it on your screen now. Most of you have done this well and truly by now. We can use the Q&A feature where you can type your questions and comments. Equally, you could put some comments into the chat. Where it makes sense, we'll actually continue to read through those comments as they come through. And if it makes sense to actually raise them and talk about them as we go, I'll actually make sure that happens. Otherwise, we'll keep it for the end when we do actually move into more of a Q&A opportunity with our panel members. But make sure you put them down so you don't actually forget them. I can't tell you how many times I've thought of a great idea, but by the time it got to the Q&A session, I'd actually forgotten it. So that will help. Okay, we might move on to the next slide. I'm going to introduce you to our fellow panel today. We've got Alex Boland, who is the Director of ANZ Operations for COPC. Welcome, Alex. Obviously, we've done a lot of work with you over the years. So again, another great opportunity to really see what the research is telling us. We then have from Citrus Group, who, as I said before, we've partnered with again on this research. We have Donna Alcock, and Donna does not look like that in real life. You will see Donna very shortly, or you can see her already on your screen. Donna's the Director of Operations at Citrus Group, and we also have with us Julie Curry today, who's the Director of Client Engagement from Citrus Group. Today is really hot off the press. You know, yesterday there was a fabulous breakfast launch held at the Citrus Group premises in Sydney, where people got to see a real sneak peek and hear from Alex, Julie and Donna about the research and what it was telling us. But today, obviously, that was an opportunity for people in Sydney. But today is a great way to actually see and hear some of the really interesting stats that are coming out of this year's survey. We will continue to move along. As I said, the session allows you to participate. And we're really hoping that you take as much away from this as we certainly have in seeing it being pulled together, and welcome comments and questions as we work through. So Alex, I'm going to hand over to you now to get us started on the insights that you've been able to gather through this. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much, Fran, and thank you to the Citrus Group for sponsoring and supporting this event. And I'm traveling through Sydney today, so I'm actually sitting in their office. They gave me space to even be here and present it to you today. Let me start by talking about the data set, so you get a sense of like who responded to this and how valid the data is. We got close to 250 contact centres from all across Australia involved. The big three locations are still consistently Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane are represented, but every single state is here, both metro and regional. Metro is roughly 3/4 of the sample size. And the number of centres, 60% have a single contact centre, 18% had two, and then the remainder was like 3 or 4 or 5. Collectively, this report represents about 35,000 frontline staff from all across Australia. So there's quite a lot behind the numbers that I will take you through. But it is a salary report, and you might have noticed salaries have been quite interesting in the last year. So we actually started with, did you increase your frontline salaries? And 87% said that they did. Last year, for instance, that number was 78%. So more people have increased frontline salaries than in the past. But we also asked, by how much did you increase those salaries by? And we provided ranges there. So less than 1%, 1 to 2%, etc. The darker blue in that chart on the right-hand side is 2022 answers. So what people said in March last year, as opposed to March this year. What you can see is 46% last year were in that 2 to 3% range. This year, there wasn't that many. What we do see, though, is lots increasing by 4% or more than 5%. In fact, above 4% increases was 46% of respondents, 46% of centres. So basically half of centres increased by 4 or more percent, whereas last year that was just 14%. So more centres have increased salaries, and they've increased it by a greater amount. And the scale, the legend here, I kept it the same so we could compare from last year, but I thought it was worthwhile to also split it out just for this year, so you can see the upper end, because there's actually quite a few, way more than 5%. So on the right-hand side here, so again, increased salaries in the last 12 months, 10% of centres that did increased it by 9% or more. There was actually 9% there that increased by 10% or more. Some centres were talking about 12 or 13% increases for frontline staff in the last 12 months. So that's a lot. We also asked about looking forward, what does the next 12 months look like in terms of salaries and increase in them? So will you increase? 80% are planning to increase. And the amount they're going to increase by does vary still, but there's quite a few at that upper end, increasing by a lot. So 65% said they will increase by between 3 and 5.99%. So that's where the weight of them sits. But still, there's like 10% plus plan to increase by more than 6% over the next 12 months. So we have had more increases than in the past. The increases have been bigger, and we're expecting to see lots of increases again in the next 12 months, expecting to be slightly less than the last 12, but still quite a lot of activity happening there. So let's move away from frontline for a moment and look at overall salaries. I included this slide to give you just a snapshot of where the averages are, but the full report breaks it down in ranges so you can work out if you're in the top 20th percentile or bottom 20th or whatnot. But just to give you the landscape of the industry and what it looks like today. Brand new entry-level customer service staff, on average, they'll start at 55 to 60. There is a range, and I'll take you through that later on, but 55 to 60. For tenured staff, there's a bump of about 5,000. So they're in that 60 to 65. And then we get into the supporting roles. Initially, the real-time analysts and the QA around 70 to 75. Trainers earning about 5 more, and team leaders in that bracket as well. And then the next 5K range is for the more technical supporting roles. So the business analysts, the forecasters, and the schedulers. So that's where the frontline staff and those first level support sit. Then we get into more of the middle management. So the L&D manager and the QA manager, the average is just above 100. The workforce manager, 110 to 120. And the ops manager, they're 120 to 130. So ops manager, the one level above team leader. So kind of middle management is 100 to 130 on average. And then the next level up, the more senior leadership, sit in that 140 to 160. So the QA head, the L&D head, shared services head, WFM head, all around 150 roughly. And then the head of all operations, so like group head of contact centers in the 160 to 180 range. But this is, again, just the average. So let's start to talk about the ranges on the following slides. Before I jump into them though, I might draw Julie, Donna, Fran, any comments as you look at this kind of as a landscape of salaries in our industry?
I think, Alex, I think it's interesting that we are seeing that shift, new hire and tenured at entry level. But probably the interesting thing for me is the range again. We're seeing some slight increases for each of those functional roles as well. In the past, we might have seen those grouped more together as far as, the technical and support roles. But if we then go up to those head roles, there's definitely some growth that we've seen across the board there. And again, a 20,000 variance between it with averages. There's certainly some room in there. I can't wait to see some of the, to go through some of that more detail around those specifics. But, I think someone made a comment to me when we were in Adelaide. I think you were at a session with us and they talked about the concern at not seeing growth in the prior years. I think we can certainly say there's been some changes in the environment, which is, again, obviously why it's so important to continue to see this information to help us. So, looking forward to the more detailed data.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting too, Alex. I wonder when we get more detail around the hiring of these roles as well, whether there's more external people coming into businesses that are pushing up those salaries. So I know that was a discussion point yesterday around that succession planning and what work from home and the hybrid model has. So in these roles, the expertise of businesses bringing in external expertise and having to pay higher than growing from within. So,
and I think at that sort of front end and entry level roles, the challenge I think businesses are seeing and I'm hearing in the market is that bringing people in with little or no contact center experience, but having to pay them more than what they've traditionally had to do, is really telling at the moment.
Yeah, big challenge to bring in new people and paying them more than your tenured staff. That's a interesting dynamic. So let me show you the range. The full report has a chart like this for maybe about 30 different job types. So lots more detail than we'll go through today. But this is just inbound customer service staff. How much do we pay them by ranges? The blue is new hire entry. The orange is tenured or experienced. And the variation. So the category staff are minus 45,000 to above 75. There are frontline staff like working in Australia right now who are earning in the low to mid 40s, like not many, like 2% or 4%, but not very many, but still it's out there. Can see a couple are still like in that 45 to 50, but where it kind of takes off, most centers sit in above 50,000. The average being like in that 55 to 65 range. The top 25%, top 25% of centers paying above 70,000 for tenured workers. So that's where that top quartile sits. But there are some centers as well, like on the flip side, bringing in new hires at 70, at 75,000. So it's very hard to compare like for like across different organizations. Like some literally pay twice for the same title, but I imagine the role's quite different. We see also tech support here, and there's a bunch of frontline roles that we talk through. Tech support is similar ranges. There's nobody who's tenured earning less than 45,000 for tech support. You can see there's just a bigger shift upwards in these figures. So for the tenured experienced, a third of tech support staff who are tenured are earning above 75,000. And the question specifically is asking annual base salary, excluding additional payments such as super and commission. So just like their base salary is what we're looking at here. So the full report takes you through sales and inbound and outbound and debt and whatnot. And we've also included a table that, by all means, take a screenshot of this, but we'll give you the recording as well. this has all the frontline roles that we discussed, whether they were new hire or tenured, and how much they were earning by category here. So overall, looking at the weighted average down the bottom, 3% below 45,000, and about 11% above 75. Having spoken to some of the centres that completed this, there are the most technical roles that I'm aware of, high complexity, high emotional intelligence required. They have frontline staff in the 90s, so 92, 95, that sort of level. And then on the flip side, typically outsourcers in the low 40s. So you can almost have the same role getting paid. Like on paper, it's the same role. In reality, it's very different, but doubling the salaries. But this is just the baseline of the base salary, like the base salary, not the variable pay. So we also asked around the financial incentives for the roles. So firstly, do you pay some type of variable, like an incentive, a bonus, a commission by frontline staff roles? And essentially, if the title has sales in it, it's very likely there's a variable component. If it's inbound sales and service, 98% of centers pay some type of variable pay. In the middle there, it's about 50-50 when it's tech support and customer service and online chat, 50-50, providing some type of incentive. And then interestingly, the outbound debt collection is the least likely to get a variable pay, even though the skills required and the nature of the work is kind of similar to outbound sales. You're just convincing them to pay debt as opposed to buy a new product. So overall, for frontline staff, 66% get some type of financial incentive on top of their base salary. When we looked at what that incentive was, so you can see here broken down by each of those roles, but individual bonuses by far are the most common to receive. Team bonuses occur fairly regularly, around 20%, and then there's other financial incentives. Looking at those percentages, so they add up to more than 100 because it's quite common. There might be a team bonus and an individual bonus, or an individual and an other financial incentive. But individual bonuses are almost 4 times more likely than team bonuses when we look across the industry. So for frontline staff, it's quite common, less so for supporting roles, but it's individual bonuses where most of it comes in. Looking at team leader salaries and the ranges here, there are team leaders in the low 60s. So there's team leaders earning less than frontline staff. In some operations, the team leaders are starting lower than what frontline staff would be in other centers. So 7% below 65,000. And at the top end, almost 10% earning above 100,000. So the average, like most centers are in that kind of 75 to 90,000 range for base salaries for team leaders. But that's still quite a lot there, over 25% above $90,000. So again, a big ranges we see for team leaders. We added an additional question this year for team leaders around how many staff they managed. And the thinking was that if the job is bigger, if they're managing more staff members, they might earn more. So this is saying how many FTE does each of your team leaders manage on average? And 6% said it was quite small, less than 5. But a big chunk of them in that 11 to 15 staff members or FTE per team leader was 48%. But there's 3% of centers who say, actually, we manage more than 20 FTE per team leader. So the average overall was 12 staff members or 12 FTE per team leader, with 75% within that 8 to 16 ratio. The smallest, there's a couple of centers that said team leaders only manage 2 per FTE each. And then on the extreme other end, there was a number above 20 with one center, the maximum, saying that each team leader manages 26 FTE, which is like quite a remarkable number if you think about how much time they actually get with their frontline staff. When we analyzed this by salaries, there wasn't any link. If anything, there was a slight indication that people who earn more, people who manage more earn less. So the highest ratios were on slightly lower salaries, but it wasn't statistically significant. I suspect that might be the outsourcers who tend to pay less, but have more staff members per team leaders. Looking back on these salaries this year compared to last year, or comparison, starting with frontline roles, so just inbound customer service roles, the percentage paying above 60. And you might have seen a similar chart. I put it on LinkedIn as we were collecting the data. So the dark blue here is 2022 and the light blue is 2023. Last year, 29% of centres were paying above 60,000 for new staff members. Now it's gone from 29, so that's less than 1 in 3. Now it's 44. So getting close to 1 in 2 paying above 60,000. That's quite a big change. Customer service tenured, well, it was 51% above 60,000 last year. Now 64%. So again, a big increase there. And not just for frontline staff, when we look at all the other roles here, team leaders, QAs, trainers, etc., most of them are showing increases as well. So on the right-hand side is some proportion paying over 80,000. For team leaders, it was 45% last year. Now it's 56% earning above 80,000. Big increases for QAs, trainers, and knowledge managers. So for QAs, it was only 26% last year. Now it's 40%. For trainers, only 29% earned over 80,000 a year ago. Now 58% earn over 80,000. Knowledge managers 44 to 64, but interestingly, not all roles have shown a big increase. In fact, for real-time analysts, the RTAs down the bottom, I could cut this in lots of different ways. There hasn't been an increase in this data set, and like this is hundreds of centers involved. Real-time analysts, the salary for that role hasn't appeared to increase in the last 12 months. So that was interesting that some roles have seen so much and others have seen less or none, as the case might be. I'll just bring in my panel on that one as well. Fran, Julie, Donna, any comments or observations as you look at these numbers?
Look, I think for me, particularly those technical roles, Alex, there's been a lot of investment, and I think organisations, certainly members we're talking to, are really seeing if they don't get that right, actually it doesn't matter. Like if they don't invest properly in training, if they've not got all of the support functions working well, it actually means they've got longer term, it's a real impact financially and from a customer experience perspective, and also contributes to high levels of attrition early on. So I actually think that makes sense. I think it shows that members are thinking about what is the root cause that's contributing to some of those broader environmental issues, and how do we make sure our people are well supported and prepared when they're actually dealing with customers. So I actually think it's a really healthy sign, but also one that shows organisations are thinking about it. It's also highly competitive, like find great trainers, find great knowledge management leads. It's competitive to get them. So I think it's probably a little bit of both, but I do think it's not a bad sign.
Yeah, and I think on the other side of around the inbound customer service, with the tenure especially, I think that's around holding on to your people. What do we need to do? And obviously salary, we've discussed this, might not be the only one driver, but it's a key driver. And because the market is where it is, where we know there's a lot of opportunity and choice, and we've seen on all the slides that there's such a variance of salaries that are being offered from operation to operation, you want to retain your staff. So you're having those conversations to get people not only in the door, but to keep the people that you've got in the door as well.
Yeah, we need to get the right people in, and then we need to support them. So get recruitment right, and then make sure like the trainers and knowledge managers and QAs are finding accuracy by high levels, driving high levels of accuracy, and we're actually paying them reasonable salaries. It's a lot of parts.
There's a question in our QA from Sharon Clark in relation to similarities or otherwise in regard to private and public sector. I know you've cut data differently elsewhere, but I don't know if you wanted to touch on that yet or sort of get to it more as we go.
Yeah, we in this one, like in this presentation we're working through, we haven't split out by industry, but the biggest single group of centres was government. I think it was like 1 in 5 centres were government, like local, state or federal. So in the full report that'll be available in a couple of weeks' time, we're going to split out government versus private, and for key positions and key ratios. So you'll see a breakdown of that. So it's a good question. I don't have it today. It will be in the full report. And at the end of this, there'll be a QR code so you can register for that.
Perfect.
Okay, let's jump up from frontline and support to some of the more senior roles. Oh, this is where you see some quite large salaries. So head of people HR. So we're asking contact center leaders is about the people in the contact center. So the person responsible for people in the contact center. The ranges went up by $20,000 buckets. The bottom range for this role, under 100,000, there wasn't a single person with that title, head of people or head of HR, that fell in that category. A lot of them fell between 120 and 160. That was a summary that I provided earlier. Quite a lot, 140 to 160. But at the extreme end, like right there at the top, you can see there's people earning basically $250,000 for this sort of role. Again, it comes back to the organization you work for and the scope. Like if you are head of people and there's 75 people in the contact center, that's quite different than if you're running like a 6,000 seat operation across Australia and you're responsible for all of them. So you need to consider the environment, and that explains why like people are earning twice as much as others in the same role. WFM is quite similar in regards to that. So a whole lot of head of WFM fall in that sort of 100 to 160, 120, 160 range. But there are some at the top end. I imagine, again, those people are looking after operations with 2,000 plus frontline staff, earning comfortably over $200,000 for head of WFM roles. Again, the full report has like around 20 to 30 different roles that we go through in detail, and we break it down by ranges. You can see all of that. It doesn't make for great presentation just to read out numbers though. So I want to move on and talk about working at home and what we're seeing changes around there. So firstly, we asked what proportion of staff members work at home. You can see it by role here. And then we also compared it to last year briefly. So one of the reasons why we break it up by role is that we found that there's a lot of variation here. So you see, for instance, trainers right at the top. So the blue is I'm in the office 100% of the time. The orange on the right is I'm at home 100% of the time, and the green is somewhere in between. Trainers are the people that are most likely to be in the office. We see that later on, that a lot of the training happens in the office still. Then the operation leaders, contact center managers, ops managers, team leaders, they're the other roles that are most likely to be in the office full time. Frontline staff are almost at the bottom there. Only 3% of centers say that the frontline staff are in the office full time. Then you have 86% saying it's some type of hybrid, and then 11%, 1 in 10 centers, have their frontline staff at home, like all day, every day, permanently. What was interesting is we did this report almost exactly 12 months ago, and we said, post-COVID, what does work at home look like? And generally across all of these roles, centers on average said there'll be less working at home. We will be back in the office more than what we are. It was anticipated that almost 10% would be in the office full time with no work at home. In reality, that's been the complete reversal. Actually, more at home now than a year ago. So only 3% in the office full time. The anticipation was 9% will be in the office full time. There's been a flip. So I'm curious if there's a lag and we will be going back to the office more as an industry, or whether this extends more and we see perhaps next year there's less of these blues, less of these we're completely in the office, far more in the orange and green. So very interesting to see that there's been an extension of working at home when the industry forecast a decrease of work at home, more time in the office. So I'm very interested in my panelists' view on this one as well, because this is a way you attract or detract staff members from applying as well.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, Alex. I think that from the clients that I'm speaking to at the moment, it's the fear, and what I mean by that is it's the fear of enforcing people to come back into the office and what that knock-on effect is going to be. And so, the conversations I'm having is what do we do? What's the incentive to get people back into the office without making them feel that we're dictating this to them and taking away this benefit or incentive that as they see it. So I think that that's where the stress has been. Is I think centres do want to bring people back into the office, and not necessarily full time. I don't think that there's not many people I'm speaking to that want people in the office 5 days a week, 365 days a year and all that kind of thing. But I think what they do want is to bring people back together for various different sort of collaboration and cultural perspectives. So it's just how they do it, and I think that's the challenge that everybody's facing at the moment.
Yeah. Thank you.
I agree, and obviously, Julie, you and Donna and Citrus Group have a lot of clients who are grappling with this. So you're sort of seeing it from that employer perspective. Certainly, what we're seeing with some members is, and Alex, it talks to your point about a year ago, people thought we would be in a different place. And it was this sense of, COVID was still kind of this temporary thing. But I think that, certainly some of the members I'm speaking to are saying we've kind of got to question why we care now. And I don't mean that flippantly, but if choice matters, if choice is so important, if it contributes to that engagement and attraction so much, what is it that we need to rethink that is about how we lead, how we manage, how we engage, how we collaborate, how we do those other things. So we're certainly seeing some of our members really trying to push different thinking and really engage in thought leadership around, what is driving us to think that's the right decision from a real arm's distance, which I think is a really mature, leadership approach to really say, what is it we want here? And are there structural components that we actually need to rethink how we've always done it? I do say the contact centre is one of those environments. We still do things the same way we've done them about 20 years ago a lot of the time. So, is this an indicator that people are really trying to push and innovate in some of those leadership components, which are, proving, kind of to connect to those attraction components for employees. I think it's exciting times though with that, right?
It's super exciting. There's this, it's an odd phrase, so bear with me, but there's a phrase which is, you don't know who's swimming naked until the tide goes out. What I mean by that is there's been a lot of contact center operations, I think, in Australia that have gotten by managing by their gut and just by walking past and watching people do stuff and not really having structured one-on-ones and KPIs, and QA's a bit laxed. And now they've gone to work home and they kind of realize they're swimming naked. They didn't have the structures in place and performance has dropped and they don't know what's going on. And I think the reaction some of the time is we need to pull them back into the office rather than we need to get the right processes in place to support them to succeed at home and measure their performance and enable them for success. So
I agree with that. And I think the other struggle is a lot of the time our leaders have learnt from what they've done as well. So it's new for them. So it's actually a new muscle that needs to be built and flexed and fostered. We've got a question here from James McManus in relation to whether we're seeing organisation with set days, and Donna and Julie, maybe you've got some, insights into that one, particularly with, I know we hear a lot about anchor days and things like that. What are you seeing from your clients? Are they kind of sticking with some patterns or mandated kind of components with that?
Yeah, I think, and it's probably going to be unpopular, but there's no rhyme or reason. And this is the challenge for most industries, not just in contact centre. You've got organisations that are sticking to anchor days, as you alluded to, Fran, where they're asking people to come in on days. And you've got other organisations that are giving free will almost and just saying, hey, we need you in a couple of days a week per team. Can you make sure that happens? And I think there's pros and cons to both, and everyone's trying to find their way. It was interesting, the slide back around the HR piece. I think this links into this really key, because people are putting more emphasis on having HR and that people and culture piece to support them in those decisions and to understand how to get the right mix, because everyone's battling it with it. And I think the part with this is to fail fast. So we're seeing a lot of clients that are trying things, but if it doesn't work, then go another direction really quickly as well. So that's probably a long-winded answer and not a very critical one, but it's kind of everyone's feeling their way, and we're still doing that, 2 years after we had to figure it out and didn't have choice. Now we've got a bit of choice. People are struggling to figure out what is the right direction.
Yeah, agreed. And I think the thing that we're finding at the moment is, and what a lot of businesses are doing to kind of navigate this, is they've gone from, you know, where they might have been doing remote training for new starters, onboarding, that kind of thing. Businesses, what I'm seeing is they're starting to bring people back in for the training, the development, and they're using the work from home or the hybrid model as a bit of a carrot for when they add a complete training or they deem them as competent. So particularly for those from agents, is that's what they're doing now. Bring them in, get them trained in the office so they meet their peers, they build that sort of culture, and then they go out back to the work from home model, whatever that might look like for that particular organisation.
Yeah, the data would support that as well. So I may well go into that on the next couple of slides, because it underlines, I think, what you were all talking about just then. Firstly, in terms of being more structured in how we do work at home, we asked, is there a minimum internet requirement for work at home staff? And 64% said yes. And you can kind of see the speeds there. The speeds are not the focus, but generally it's 26 megabits or higher. What is interesting is that a year ago, 54% of centers didn't have any minimum internet speed. It was just you could work at home. So less than half required internet to be tested. Now it's 2/3 of them require it to be tested. So we're starting to establish kind of standards or minimum skills or expectations for what working at home looks like. And in terms of what Julie was just talking about, like when can you work at home? From date of hire for frontline staff, from date of hire, there are some centers that do that, 15% though. So 5 out of 6 centers require frontline staff to meet something prior to working at home. And it could be as simple as tenure, like the first month is in the office. It might be when they finish training, 31% say that, or it might be a combination of that, like 23% say performance and tenure threshold, and 23% are saying it's just when they reach a certain performance level. So if you're hiring people to work at home from day one, that's fine potentially, but it's not the common approach. Only 1 in 6 centers are looking at doing that. And in terms of where they spend their time, I think Donna spoke to this one. Very few, 14% say that their staff members have total flexibility in their location. So that top one there. So which of the following is most accurate? Staff have total flexibility in their location. They determine where they work from each day. 14% of centers fall in that category. 24%, the flip side, staff have no flexibility. We schedule them. So most centers are working at home, but 24% say we tell them when and where to work for that. And then the most common, 38%, is staff mostly determine their location within organization guidelines/rules. So there's far more structure than it was in the past, both for how we do work at home now and when work at home is allowed for frontline staff. In terms of plans for the next 12 months and changes to the personnel and like the number of people, we asked over the next 12 months, do you expect to change your frontline headcount, your frontline FTE rather? 8% say that they'll decrease, 38% say there won't be a change, and then over 50% are anticipating that they will be bigger in a year time than they are now. They're going to increase their FTE. So that's quite a lot, like the majority planning to increase. Reflecting on the last 12 months, why did you increase over the last 12 months? What's interesting about this data set here, like increase in volume was 70%, marketing 26%, seasonality 20%. For these categories, it's almost exactly the same figures as last year. So the breakdown's the same. There's one exception to that, and that's third from the bottom, COVID-19 pandemic. 10% of centers said that resulted in an increase in staff members in the last year. A year ago, though, that was 35%. So if you want kind of more evidence that COVID is now as business as usual, we're moving past that. 1 in 3 centers said last year, COVID resulted in us increase, and now it's 10%. Next year, I anticipate like 2%. Like it's very much a non-factor compared to everything else that impacts on volume and workload for us. Another big change, though, was we asked this 2 ways over the last 12 months and over the next 12 months, but do you expect the ratio of full-time and part-time and temps to change? And it was interesting as we talked through this prior, the data here is saying that full-time and part-time, a combination, like some centers are increasing, some are decreasing. But a lot of centres are saying that they're decreasing more of the non-permanent roles, like the temporary, the fixed term, the 0 hour, etc., is what's coming up in this data set. But we're also seeing different things in our personal experiences. So I'd be curious for my panelists as well to jump in on this one.
Yeah, and I think when we were talking before, what Julie and Donna are seeing is a little bit different to what we've seen with some of our members.
Yeah.
And there's probably a few things, well, there's always a lot of things that contribute to that, right? But, you know, certainly from a number of our government members, they've had to make some changes because of the legislation changes around casualisation in the workforce. So they've had to make some decisions, and some of that's around changing their model of partnering with BPOs. Some of it means that then actually sees them reduce their casual workforce. It might see them increase contracts, so not ongoing, but through contract. And it does see them increasing their permanent. So government had to move quite quickly on that legislative change. But certainly, you know, with a view that it's about trying to manage and minimise staff that are left on casual employment types for years on end. I know some government agencies had casual staff who were coming up to long service leave. So there's a reason that, you know, the legislation was looking to actually make some adjustments with that. But we're certainly seeing different shifts across the board. Julie and Donna, I know you're seeing some different things with some of your clients.
Yeah, it's interesting because I know when we looked at this data, I was a bit taken aback because what I'm seeing in the market at the moment is, you know, perm has been king for the last couple of years, and we've talked about the reasons why that would have been, that the market being so tight with talent, you know, offering people permanent opportunities was the smart thing for businesses to be doing. And what I'm thinking now is, or what I'm seeing now is, in the, you know, with the economy the way it is, people's uncertainty, we're actually seeing a little bit of a flip. We're actually seeing the opposite, that more businesses are starting to go down the temp hiring model, and maybe it's that sort of temp to perm, the uncertainty. They don't want to commit to perm at the minute, but they need the headcount. But we're certainly seeing the flip of what this data is showing us at the moment.
Yeah, and I think in our world, it's more about how we manage the co-employment, with having a recruitment supplying your temp labour, and then what that means for you, and navigating all of those IR changes as well. So that's really an interesting piece that we have to work with our clients, and that equal responsibility, all the legislative changes, but giving advice on what that looks like for that temporary on hire model as well. So again, I think this will continue to ebb and flow over the next 12 months as well, Alex. So it'll be interesting to see what happens next year, you know, with government changes and so forth, what impact that has as well.
Yeah, and I think we talked a little bit about the importance of recruiting and getting it right, and the salary of the HR. If you are hiring more full-time staff, there's a risk with that you get the wrong person in. Tends to give you a little bit more space to experience someone and build that relationship and see them in your operations. So if you're moving more towards permanent part-time or permanent full-time, you really need to make sure you're investing in getting the right people in the door and testing them as well. So you need to be more serious in how you recruit, and make sure you do it well. Yeah. Finally, I'll finish up on the recruitment piece as well. We also asked, do you use external agencies for recruitment? And the numbers have increased slightly this year. It was a little bit below half last year. Now 50% of centres use external agencies to help them recruit. In terms of what roles they recruit for and by how much, we broke it down by frontline staff and leadership staff, new roles. For frontline, the percentages there, let me explain it so it's clear. It's from less than 20% of your frontline staff come externally, and then 21 to 40 and all the way up to 81 to 100. So firstly, what we see is that most centres, like 50% at least, are using external agencies, but they're not all using it in the same way. There's a chunk that use them to kind of supplement their internal recruitment. So less than 20% of people come from external. And there's a section as well, 29%, almost 1 in 3, who use them for almost every single new hire that they have. I think it was 19% overall are using them for every single new hire. So it's 50-50 on who uses them. but those who use them as well, there's a lot of variation in that. For the new team leader roles on the right-hand side, like new leadership staff, it's less common that you're using a third party to hire for those roles. And what I think it might be is that a lot more of the new leadership roles come from internal in business. So you don't go to market. So if we asked it a different way and was talking about external hires, I think we might see a different relationship there, the more balanced one, internal and recruiters hiring. So let me run you through a couple of the observations I had as I worked through this data. Then we'll flow into a Q&A piece. I can see some comments and questions already coming through. Feel free to add to that. We'd love to talk through the data a bit more. But firstly, salaries, big thing. More centres have increased salaries, and they've increased it by more than in the past. We can see the data there, but salaries have changed, absolutely. The data validates what you're feeling and seeing. Secondly, work at home is greater than it was a year ago, even though a year ago we anticipated it'd be less. Like, it's gone in the opposite direction to where we forecasted it will be a year ago, like what the industry thought would happen. There seems to be a change in non-permanent staff members. At least the surveys indicating there's a shift towards more permanent staff members. In terms of how we're recruiting for our roles, slightly more saying that they use external agencies now than a year ago. And 19% of people that do use them, 100% of their new staff members come from external agencies. So they're fully committed to the third-party recruiter model. Then finally, in terms of variable pay, 66% of centres pay variable pay to frontline staff. So most frontline staff are getting variable pay. For supporting roles, I didn't highlight this in this webinar, it's in the full report, but for team leaders and QAs and trainers, 40% of those roles have variable pay. So you're far more likely to have variable pay as a frontliner than you are in a first level support, team leader, QA trainer, etc. And individual bonuses, they're the most common approach when it comes to variable pay. So they're 5 things that I took out. I'm on, if you look at my page number on the bottom right, I'm on page 73 because I'm a subset of the full report. The full report has a lot more data. We've only gone through about a third of it or so. So I would encourage you to grab out your phone and use that QR code. Jess is waiting with bated breath to get your registrations. I'm hoping we can get it finalized and reviewed and draft done so you can get it within the next fortnight or so. But thank you for joining. Let's go into the Q&A. Please submit.
Thanks, Alex. And definitely, we really want to see you register your interest for the report. Obviously, those that participated in the survey will receive a copy. Once that full report is finalised, we'll get that sent out to you. But again, you've seen but a snippet this morning from Alex. And I'm sure you can actually take away that, you know, some of the devil is in that detail, and actually having visibility of you know, the breadth and depth gives you an opportunity to really think about where you sit, you know, within that current state. Julie and Donna, what was your biggest takeaway from the data? Was there anything in there that you were really surprised with? I know you had your session yesterday as well, and maybe there was some questions that were raised or conversation there that you thought was really interesting. What are you guys thinking?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, it's that base entry level and where the increases come from that. Expectation, I guess, when you walk in the door with maybe no preconceived skills. And to sound generationally biased, I don't know whether that is a generational thing or just a market thing at the moment, but I think employers are struggling with that at the moment as well. So we have to change mindset, and hopefully, you know, I can see the participants on the call. This data will help you have some meaningful conversations with elevating up that conversation to seniors to say that actually we have to pay. This is what the market is dictating now. And to make us competitive to get the talent in the door. And I think the flip side of that is then when you get the talent and you're paying them, how are you onboarding them, and what is that impression, and training them to keep them there. We talked about attrition last year, and we worked with COPC last year around attrition report. Everyone's facing that. That's not going to go away, but it becomes, Alex made a really good point yesterday around what the true value of attrition is. And if salaries keep increasing, that is only going to cost you more money as well. So I think that for me, everything works in hand now. You don't separate one out from the other. So they were the key takeaways for me, Fran.
Thanks, Donna. What about you, Julie?
Yeah, look, very, very similar. And I think, look, you know, some of the data is not surprising, and some of it has been a bit of an eye-opener. And I'm very excited to see the, like I said, the full report. I think the work from home piece it's just very, very topical for me in the conversations I'm having with clients at the moment. And I guess what I'd like to, you know, get more information around is what other businesses are doing to you know, incentivize people to come back into the office, because that is the key thing for businesses now. But going back to your point as well, Fran, is, you know, what's the reasoning or the rationale behind getting people back in? Is it just that somebody's made that decision that they want people back in the office but with no substance? Or is there some actual facts behind that, you know, performance has gone down, people are not hitting their targets and that kind of thing? So that was a really good eye-opener for me.
Yeah, and I think to that point, I think that certainly we've had some conversations with members where there's this mismatch between why I say you need to be back here and staff turn back up and the office is empty, and none of those things come to life. So there's this real need to really critically assess that, I think. So yeah, I think you're right. That's going to continue to be a challenge. And, you know, in some organisations, it is that there's a position, you know, and executives reached a position that says, as a group, this is what we're doing, now make it happen. So sometimes that, you know, is a challenge for the leaders that are actually working in the space. I reckon one of the takeaways from me, and Alex, it was on one of your really early slides around the role breakdown and where you were seeing sort of the incentivized component on top of base, and a call out that you made around debt collection. And, you know, for me, if I think about where we're seeing high burnout rates and, you know, additional requirements for empathy and resilience, debt collection, particularly cold call, outbound debt collection, is one of those really tough spaces. To see it as a real outlier in relation to incentivized components. I find that really interesting. I don't know whether it's right or wrong, but I just find it really interesting that of any, you can kind of see that, having seen the impact of debt collection on workforces and you know, the changing face of vulnerability if you think about what's going on externally in the environment. So that was a really interesting one for me.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting.
What about from people on the session today? Have you got any specific questions? Did you find anything there that you thought, oh my gosh, didn't expect that? Or, you know, kind of it is what you're seeing in your environment now. I don't think we've got any other specific questions, but we'd love to hear if there is, you know, kind of anything there that really kind of threw you, or you thought, yeah. Oh, look at that. We can see us all again now.
I think some of the common feedback yesterday in the session, when we just had the networking piece afterwards, was around there's not big shocks in here as well either. So, you know, sometimes we look at things on paper and we go, that's wild. I think the only biggest shock was probably the anticipation of work from home in comparison to where
reality.
Yeah. So, but as far as I'm sure everybody on the call now is knowing they're having these conversations about salary now to actually get talent through the door. So seeing it on paper, I think solidifies what everybody's facing when they're hiring or training or trying to retain staff. So that was a takeaway that we heard from our clients yesterday, definitely.
Yeah. And one of the things that is I guess a bit more of a statement or something to throw out there for food for thought is around promotions within contact centres, and that we are probably going to look at in more detail in the coming months. But around this piece around people working from home, we talked there about salaries increasing for those sort of team leaders and senior roles, and saying we'd be interested to know if that's people getting hired or promoted from within, or bringing people in externally, and the impact of people working from home, and does that stop them getting promoted or stop them being noticed by the powers that be that make those decisions? And we're saying that that's something that's sort of played on all of our minds recently, of going, be good to get some stats and information around that to see what's happened over the last couple of years around those internal promotions within contact centres, and has that work from home hindered people?
Yeah.
And it's funny because that is anecdotal, isn't it? We're hearing people say, oh, you're not noticed, you're not seen. But I think you're right. It's going to be one of those longitudinal components that, will kind of play out. There is a question there, Alex, around the report breakdown with data. So you talked before and said it would be industry sector. Did you cover off size as well?
Where appropriate, we're going to break it down by size as well. It needs to be a sufficiently large sample by size for any comparison to make sense. So we'll try to make it as relevant to help you make those decisions. My hypothesis, having not yet broken down the data, though, is we will see a difference by industry. I think you'll find that government pays more on average, for instance, than private, and private chain pays more than outsources. I am not confident you'll see a big difference in frontline salaries by the size of the centre, though. Maybe for like the team leader or the contact centre manager, like you can be a contact centre manager for 20 seats, or you can be a contact centre manager for 400. I think you'll see a difference in those roles by size, less for the frontline staff and less maybe for the team leader. Like a team leader pays fairly similar.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, well, I am mindful of time, and I want to thank Julie, Donna, Alex. Seriously interesting data that, not only that we've explored today, but can't wait to see that next stage and next breakdown of data. The real opportunity is how do we actually use it to help us make informed and different decisions and have conversations with our executives within organisations. Thank you all for attending. We will send out the information on the session as advised. Hopefully you've all now registered for your copy of the report. And there's a couple of questions that we will reply to in the session, because I'm just mindful we're about to be cut off. But it does talk a little bit about attrition for, more broadly. And I know we've done a attrition report, and we'll be looking at, what does that look like over the next 12 months. So I don't think you've got anything on at the moment, Alex, for a next. Like you haven't got new research now about attrition, but you would be looking to do a second report on that, I'm sure.
Yeah, there's a couple of points around that. So a question just popped up and a comment in the chat, which I'll address quickly. We just did some attrition report for what larger centres are experiencing. That was in December, and Citrus, that was in partnership with Citrus again. So if you contact Julie or Donna, you should be able to find that data. There was a question there around like attrition and recruitment and internal and external. So a more detailed one. We did that maybe a year ago, a little bit over a year ago, in partnership with Auscontact. That's available on Auscontact's website, and we're repeating that later this year. So I think there may be some more events coming up towards the end of the year. We'll be repeating that by that stage. So you'll get the most recent one, basically, go to Citrus. Slightly older Auscontact has something around that, but will be repeated later on this year.
Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you at our next session.
Yeah, thank you.
Guys. Bye.
Bye.